Are you tired of the quick fixes that promise transformation that leave you feeling more disconnected from your body than ever? Welcome to the Beyond Medicine Humanized Care for Women of Influence, where we go deeper than surface level solutions. I'm Dr. Maria, a functional integrative physician specializing in women's health, metabolic dysfunction, and hormone balance. Here, we will uncover the root causes of insulin resistance, PCOS, thyroid, and adrenal issues, and explore how trauma, stress, and anxiety impact our well being. Because your body is not a microwave, it deserves personalized, compassionate care that honors its complexity. Let's embark on our journey to reclaim your health one conversation at a time. And today in the chat, I have perhaps somebody, a guest, that you might find a little bit surprising because I just didn't mention this topic on my introduction yet. We will unpack why this topic is important, and we're going to be talking about subconscious mind. And full disclosure, I have had clinical hypnotherapy many years ago, probably like 20 or more. So this is something that I know that can really help people when perhaps you have tried other tools that have not been effective. So that being said, today I have with me Adriana, who is a certified clinical hypnotherapist and founder of Loving My Wild. So thank you for being here. Welcome. And I want you to start by just introducing yourself a little bit, who you are, and how is it that you got into this?
Awesome. Of course. So, I started my own hypnosis journey probably about 6 years ago. And to everyone, no surprise to anybody, I had the same exact thoughts when I first heard about hypnosis. Like, what? This sounds crazy. Like, I don't know if I can try that. But I was at a part in my life where everything kind of felt like it was falling apart. It felt like I had put together all of these different pieces of my life that fit so perfectly together and on the outside looked so shiny. And they all started kind of collapsing in front of me. The relationship, the financial stability, career, all of these different pillars of my life were kind of falling apart. They were starting to feel like they weren't part of who I wanted to be anymore. And so I felt really raw and really scary, and I didn't know what to do about it. But I had been in the personal development world, the self-help world for long enough that I was willing to try something different. I had been in talk therapy trying to figure out, what to do about what I was feeling, about all of these emotions, what was coming up for me, where I wanted to go with my life. And I felt like talk therapy was really hitting a roadblock. So I tried something different, which was a program that used hypnosis to uncover the subconscious beliefs that were holding you back and just really uncovering the role that your subconscious plays in your life. And so I gave it a shot, and within the program, started feeling better about myself, not just about like the external, but about myself. The self-love, the self-worth really started to come together in a way that it was like what I had been searching for all of those years, but it was finally coming together with the hypnosis. So in my own journey, I was like, wow, like this is incredible. This is the tool everyone needs to know. And so I was like, how do I do this for other people? And that kind of set me off to get my certification to become a clinical hypnotherapist. And so I did a 2-year certification, got a degree in mind and body psychology. And now I help women uncover their subconscious programming. And so that can cover a whole gamut of things. It could cover anxiety and stress. habits, goal setting, but my bread and butter that I love is helping women uncover their self-doubt, their own low self-worth, and really builds themselves up, their foundation internally, builds that up in a way that supports them. So that way they have the courage to live authentically, because when we're living authentically, that's when we are fulfilled, meaningful, happy, and that's the place I believe we need to get to in order to be able to flow with the ups and downs of life. When we have a really strong internal core, it doesn't matter what we're going through in our life. I think that we can weather any storm. So that's my background, and I'm just using everything that I learned on my journey, my expertise, my training to now help women on the same path that I found myself on, a few years ago.
Right. Thank you for sharing that. And it's so interesting how when you started to talk, you started with this topic of authenticity
Mhm.
and you just ended with authenticity. So becoming your more authentic self and perhaps uncovering what, I'm going to say it in this way or these words. They might not necessarily be the words that you would use, but uncovering, the story, the narrative that perhaps we're not aware of, but that in a way is keeping us from living our life to the fullest and being our most authentic person.
Mhm.
Yeah. So I love the authenticity part. And I think that in this era of like social media, sometimes even being completely authentic and vulnerable, it's not something that we do because everybody is putting their self out there with this facade of this is who I am. Simple reasons. But I loved the authenticity part of it because I think that that also works on the brain to, in a way, relax you and be more calm and be more grounded because you're secure in who you are and the way that you're living. So let's start to talk a little bit about. I'm sure that people are asking. So, one, when we're talking about subconscious mind, what does that mean? And there's actually evidence of this. And what I mean by that is, so we know that in the brain, there are certain parts that control what we think, what we do, and the things that we're not even aware that we're doing, like breathing. So when we talk about this subconscious mind, is it like woo, or is this actually something that we know that is truly happening in human beings?
Yeah. So the subconscious mind, I like to think of it as we have three different parts of our mind. We have the subconscious, which is formed between the ages of 0 and 8. And that is the part of our mind where we are a sponge. Between 0 and 8, we're taking everything in as truth. Everything we're seeing, everything we're hearing, everything that is happening on the playground at school, it's all being sucked into our subconscious as truth. And that's because we haven't developed the second part of our mind, which is the critical mind. And the critical mind is like the protective layer that sits above the subconscious mind. And so that's the filter, that's the protection, that's the why. Why does this make sense to me? Why is this true? And we start to develop that between, like 9 and 10. And then we have the conscious mind, which is above the critical mind. And we start to develop that around, 11 to 14. And our conscious mind is our logic, our reasoning, our willpower, our ability to analyze, and decision making. And so we have these three different parts of our mind, and they all play together. And so what tends to happen is when we want to make changes in our life with our conscious mind, we're deciding this doesn't work for me anymore. I need to do this instead. Well, then it goes to the critical mind and it says, let me check in with my subconscious. What does the subconscious say? And if the subconscious has programming that's picked up that was never challenged or processed, then the subconscious goes, actually, nope, that doesn't agree with me. That doesn't align. nope, we're not going to go down that path. And so that's the system that kind of comes into play. And as for, the science behind it, I like to think of the brain as the mass, the thing that actually controls, but the mind is kind of this invisible thing around it where the brain is tangible, but the subconscious is kind of the space around it. So it's not tangible like the brain, but there is evidence that's coming out about how different parts of the brain, and this is the science, the study of neuroscience is starting to come out and show that parts of the brain are working in similar ways. So we are starting to kind of take this theory of, you could say it's woo because it's not tangible, like the brain is tangible, but the study of neuroscience is really coming forward and showing that the space, the mass of the subconscious and how it's actually playing into the different parts of the brain. So it's still a newer study. Neuroscience is still a newer study, but the study of hypnosis is actually not new. Hypnosis has been around since the ancient Egyptians and even before then as a way of really just changing our consciousness to access different parts of ourselves. So a lot of layers there, but I hope that helps.
Yeah, and and I think that, and again, that makes me think of other healing modalities that have been for a long time and probably didn't start it like on our side of the world, but on the other side of the world, that even that maybe there's not as much black and white science and evidence, what we do know is it works.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
So there is something that perhaps we still do not understand completely about the human body. And when I'm talking about the human body, I'm not only talking about the physical aspect, but about what we completely are in all of our dimensions that perhaps we still do not know and that we do not understand, and that we're still in this process of trying to explain it just because we want an explanation, not necessarily because it's needed, if that makes sense. So thank you for sharing that. And I think that when when I listen to you talk, that you say the first 8 years, that's when your subconscious brain develops. It makes me think a lot of, trauma. And I'm not saying that this is where we're going to go. But what I mean by that is we know that the experiences that you have very early on in your life will continue to affect you in your adulthood, the way that you behave, the way that you interact with the world. So there's something about our mind, our brain, that in the first years of our life, and I believe that even in utero, it is very vulnerable to the messaging, to the environment. So whether we completely understand this or not, the reality is that we know that that is an age where the brain is very vulnerable to input, whether that input is good or bad. And so love that. So you talk about, the subconscious mind and how it affects thoughts, actions, behaviors. So can you unpack for us a little bit more, the subconscious mind, how it associates with a thought, and then that thought is going to be expressed in an action or in a behavior, whether it is something that we want or that we do not want, whether it is positive or negative in terms of the outcome that it can have for us.
Yeah, of course. So I'll use a really classic example that I think we can all relate to of exercising. And so we had in it, this is perfect because at the time of recording this, it is the start of the year and I'm seeing this come up constantly, and it's the thoughts create your actions, create your behaviors is a method that rings true no matter what area of your life, what action, what behavior. So exercising. I want to exercise. That is a thought, right? I want to start going to the gym. What happens is if you have programming in your subconscious that says, exercising is really hard, or it's too hard to change my body, it's too hard to lose weight. What's the point, right? If we had parental figures, caretakers who struggled with, let's say, their weight or food or something, that all gets absorbed to us and we take that all in as truth. Now, under the surface, we're thinking to ourselves, our beliefs, they may not be conscious, but what's under the surface is it's too hard. It's almost impossible to lose weight. So we have the thought, oh, I'm going to start exercising. This would be good for my health. This makes sense. I have the thought. The programming that you have says, but it's too hard. So now the thought is, oh, well, last time I tried, it didn't work out. Remember that time a couple years ago? I tried it. I think it's just not meant for me. This is just my body type. This is just who I'm meant to be. So now that thought has changed based on your belief. And now what is the action? Not going to the gym, staying at home, maybe feeling shame and overeating because of the shame. So that belief created the thought, which created the action and the behavior, which does not align with what you actually want. And so how this can be different is, what if that belief was, yeah, losing weight is hard, but it's really rewardable. I can do hard things. Wait, I've done hard things in the past before. Remember that time I actually did lose a couple pounds when I put my mind to it. When we can change our beliefs to be about that narrative that I can do hard things, and this is just another hard thing that I know I can do. Then when you have the belief, I'm going to go to the gym or I'm going to exercise, what is the belief that's supporting that? Oh, it's going to be hard, but that's okay. I know I can push through the hard. I know I can push through the challenge. And so now what is the action? I'm going to go and exercise, and I'm going to feel maybe a little hesitation, but I'm going to feel kind of motivated. And now I went. And now, because that behavior and that action was me going, now I have more evidence that I can do it, which starts this positive feedback loop of, oh yeah, I actually can do hard things. Oh, I actually can do what I set my mind to. And then that fuels more motivation, which fuels more positive action. And then you start to get in this positive feedback loop, but it all starts with the beliefs that are under the surface.
Now, as I was hearing you talk, it came to my mind the use of like mantras or declarations, right? And there is people that say, well, the only thing that you have to do, right, is to manifest it. Is you have to say it, and then if you say it, you eventually believe it, and then you can manifest it. So when we are talking about reprogramming the subconscious mind, is it just as simple as saying, well, I'm going to wake up every day, and let's say that it is continue with exercise, and that I wake up every day and I say, as I am getting up from bed, today I am going to run 45 minutes until eventually I start running every 45 minutes. Is pre-programming our subconscious mind just as simple or easy perhaps as that? Or when we are talking about this and that you talk the positive feedback loop, is there something that needs to be happening more than just a simple declaration or mantra of what you want to do and what and how you want to change so that you just manifest it?
Yeah, that's a great point, because there is a misconception of, if I just think positive thoughts, if I just change my thoughts, I'll be good. I can reach my goal. I can manifest. But here's the thing. The subconscious mind, the programming in your subconscious mind has been repeating in your mind for years. However old you are is however long that programming has been. So if you're 50 years old, you've had that programming repeating and creating your thoughts and your actions for 50 years. If you're 25 years, right? And so we can't just tell our mind one time, oh, exercising is enjoyable. because you've had 50 years or 30 years or whatever of the opposite being true. And so there is a law of repetition that the subconscious mind does follow, where we do need to repeat the new programming, not for the same duration. Just because you're 50 doesn't mean you need 50 years of reprogramming the good, the positive, but there is an act of repetition that is required because, and this is where kind of neuroscience is starting to show with the neural pathways and such, that you need to strengthen the new in order to die off the old neural pathways. And so that does require repetition. And it's just, you can't really give you know, a diagnosis of you need 7 repetitions or you need 15. It's very hard because these things are layered, right? If you just had to go off of the exercise example, if you just had a caregiver who just didn't exercise, but you didn't really pick up a lot of, bad messaging about body and weight and food and all of that, then maybe all you need is just a couple repetitions because you have less layers to overcome. But if you come from a family with a background of whether it's something very big like eating disorders or just a lot of messaging of what food is good and bad, and all of these negative messaging around all of the things that go into losing weight, then you're going to have more layers to unpack. And all of these little layers will need their own little bits of repetition. So it really is a layered process. And that's why, the role that I play in the process is so important, because I'm trained to see the different layers and I'm trained to be like, all right, we've been here. That seems like it's not causing any resistance, but what about these layers that are going to come up too? And so it's not as simple as saying, your mantra in the morning and saying, I'm going to do hard things today. That will help and that does play a role, but that's not the equation.
Yeah, and thank you for clarifying this. And that's why I thought that it was very important that we just dwell a little bit into it. I like that you continue to mention, right, that there are these neural pathways. So for people that perhaps have never heard this word, right, I am going to explain it from like the science perspective, the way that physicians see it, and then you can explain to people how you see it. So basically, when we are talking about neural pathways, and I think that this is very important to understand. So in your brain, which is like the physical part of it, right, we have the cells that communicate with each other. And I'm doing it in the podcast, you cannot see, but basically what I'm doing is that I'm putting my fingers together, right? So for those of you seeing the videos, these fingers together, this is the way that the cells are communicating. But what happens is that when we're talking about neural pathways and new ways, is that we're basically changing the way that the neurons, which are the cells inside our brain, that's the way that they're called, that they're communicating and signaling with each other. And I'm not going to go into like all the chemistry that it's involved, but what we know is that we can reprogram our brain to function in a different way. And I think that, so physiologically, we know how this happens in terms of the chemistry. But I think that the brain is kind of like the heart, right? When we think about like the emotions and feelings, we cannot again quantify them and kind of like study them in the same way that perhaps we can study how the heart works to pump blood. And the same thing happens with the brain. We can, for example, study what happens when somebody develops cognitive decline like Alzheimer's, but we're still in this process of that thought, right? The thinking part of the brain, understanding how it is that happens. So really, the neural pathways is how these cells are communicating and are signaling, which, yes, influences the fact that you can breathe, that you can walk, that you can talk, but then it also influences other part that is less tangible, like your thoughts. So when you are talking about neural pathways, I just want to make sure that we're kind of like in the same, boat. Is there anything else that you want to add to this so that people can understand kind of like what we're talking in terms of the neural pathways and why it is important to create like this positive feedback loop that perhaps the mantra by itself cannot do?
Yeah, a metaphor I guess I would offer up is, let's say you are walking in a forest and you know where you're going, you know your destination, but the path hasn't been walked yet. And
Mhm.
in order to get to that destination, you're going to have to push through bushes, and there's not going to be a path on the ground. So you're going to be walking through the grass, and it's going to be a little chaotic, right? You're going to have a lot of tools to like get things out of the way and cut things out and create your own path. But over time, let's say you start walking that same path every day. Well, guess what? That path will start to get created. Maybe grass won't be growing there anymore, so you'll see the dirt in a pathway will be carved. There won't be trees growing on that path anymore because you're constantly walking and there's not enough vegetation for the plants to grow and stuff, right? So over time, a path does get carved. And so that's kind of how I see neuroplasticity, where it's like those connections aren't necessarily there at first, but you can make the connection. And through the repetition, that connection grows stronger. That pathway from one destination to the other grows so strong that that's the way to go now. Like in my path example, my forest example, once that path is carved, if I want to go to that destination, I wouldn't choose a path that's not carved yet. I would continue my path, right? That becomes the way of being, the way of going, the way of moving forward. And that's kind of how I see neuroplasticity play out too.
Yeah, I love that example because it making me think of a couple of things, which is one, you mentioned you need tools, right? You can try to do it just with your usual like shoes and on my own, but it's going to be a little bit harder. So you said I need tools. The other thing, and if you ever have done like gardening or redoing like your landscape, it takes time. Not only do you need tools, but it takes time and it takes some persistence. And what I mean by that is at first, you might want to give up and it is hard. And sometimes, yes, we need a break in life. You don't have to completely, do everything. But I'm thinking about a couple of elements like having tools, which that can look even at working with somebody and having the help, giving your body and your brain, right, the time and then be persistent and knowing that perhaps you start putting that pathway and it starts to rain. So then you need to stop. And then you say, well, now it's going to get muddy. Let me wait until the sun comes out again. So it's like this rhythm that it might not be, like I say, it might not be a microwave, like quick and fast. And I think that that's important to mention to people. My experience is that a lot of the times patients are looking for something quick and fast. And for some things, yes, there is things that can make it easy, quick, and fast. But for some other things, it's actually better to give your body that time to kind of like become and kind of like remodel and become new. And so thank you for sharing that. Now, I want to go back to something that you said at the beginning, which is, oh, you used an app of like hypnosis when you started on this journey. So this is actually a loaded question. It has a couple of components. So one, for somebody that has never even heard about hypnosis, doesn't even know what it is, what would you tell them and they contact you? What would you tell them that they can expect, right? Of like the experience. Some people say, am I going to feel something in my body? Should I feel something immediately after we like complete the session? So that, and then if somebody's like, well, if I can just do an app, why should I work with somebody? What would you say to those probably like two big questions?
Yeah, those are great questions. So first off, clarity around what hypnosis is and what it isn't. So there's a lot of misconceptions about what hypnosis is. I think we can all attest to seeing the stage hypnosis where people bark like dogs and cluck like chickens and such. And stage hypnosis is for entertainment purposes, and there's a different way of going about it. The work that I do is using hypnosis for therapeutic purposes. So it is not mind control. It is not a truth serum. I can't make you spill all of your secrets. I can't make you do anything that you don't want to do. You are completely focused. You're completely in control the whole time. You'll hear me the whole time. If you wanted to get up out of your seat and walk out of the door, you could, but you wouldn't because you're, committed to the process. So with that being said, what is hypnosis? Hypnosis is just a very focused state of being. So we go in and out of hypnosis all day long. When we first wake up, when we're a little groggy and like we kind of know we're awake, but like we're still kind of half asleep, that's a natural state of hypnosis. And we go into that same state right before we go to sleep when we're like kind of asleep, but like haven't fully dozed off yet. That's a natural state of hypnosis. When we are driving down the freeway and we get to our destination and we arrive without knowing that we consciously stopped at the red lights, you were just so focused on driving, you weren't paying attention to the stoplights, but there was a part of you that was paying attention, right? But you weren't paying attention to the cars passing by. You were just so singular focused. And that's essentially what it is. Essentially what it is we're recreating that state of being. And it all comes down to the brain waves. It's all about lowering your brain waves into the beta or alpha state. And so I'm just trying to elicit that state of being, but it's really just a state of relaxation. It's just a really deep, focused meditation. And my clients often say that they just feel like they're present without all of the noise, without all of the clutter in their brain, but they feel relaxed. Some people say that they feel like they got, 5 hours of sleep in 15 minutes. Some people feel really heavy, and some people feel really light and airy. And I say that however you experience that state of relaxation is how you're meant to experience it, because we're all different. And so somebody will feel really light and airy, but somebody will feel like, they're just like content. They're just there and they're just at peace with having no thoughts in their mind. So it is a little bit different in how we experience it, but I would say across the board, everyone says they feel so genuinely relaxed and that their mind was quieted. So that's the first half of the question. The second half, which is a great question, if there's apps out there, why work with somebody? And that's because there are some issues that you can work through that are very simple, that you can probably have a very simple framework. Like, let's say sleep. I would say sleep is a very simple framework. You're either sleeping or you're not sleeping. Yes, maybe you had some messaging around sleep. Maybe something had happened, but there's not too many layers there, right? You know what you want. So something like that, simple framework, you can use an app. But I would say most people have more complex things that they want to overcome, whether it's negative behaviors that they're doing that are causing trouble in their relationships, or if it is a deeper confidence issue, there's going to be more layers that need to be unpacked. And an app won't necessarily target all of those layers. An app will be generic, but it won't be personalized. So working with someone, it gives you a more personalized experience of what's going on for you. What messaging did you pick up? What are your different layers that are blocking you? And then we can work through those layers together, but you're not going to get that level of customization, of personalization by using something online or an app.
Yes. And I will, total disclosure. So for my patients, specifically my patients that have IBS or irritable bowel syndrome, and then this is at least medically. And so, for example, the app that is hypnotherapy for irritable bowel syndrome, because this is really specific for that, right? And there is evidence of it being a really good therapy specifically for two things. So irritable bowel syndrome and then smoking cessation. But again, the apps, the one that is for smoking cessation, you wouldn't be using it for irritable bowel syndrome and vice versa. So the apps, at least medically, they're very specific. And I think that if you are talking about, you said that you want to work with that authenticity, resiliency, self-doubt, self-worth, that is something that even that I am not a therapist, and but just know what I know about human and my own journey and my mental well-being. Definitely, I think that that's something that it's something that will take time, and I cannot see it as simple as necessarily working with an app because I think that this is like very kind of like complex and layery, as you said. And so I just wanted to, piggyback on that because for our listeners, I just wanted to clarify that. And some of my patients know that, again, for irritable bowel syndrome, I recommend to them the app that if I would have a patient that maybe needs to work more on them, and what I mean by that is it's less of this physiological problem like irritable bowel syndrome, but more on the being and who I am as a person. I don't think that necessarily I would recommend an app. The same as I don't recommend an app instead of therapy. Yeah, if you want to use an app for like breathing exercise, then that's really good. But I don't think that necessarily it can replace like that human care that we can provide. So with that being said, as we come to the end, anything else that you want to tell our ladies that are listening about the subconscious mind or hypnosis? That's one. And then two, anybody that wants to work with you, can you tell us a little bit? I know that you said it at the beginning, but if you can tell us a little bit more about who you work with and how they can get a hold of you.
Yeah. So I think my final thoughts would really be that if you're feeling stuck in any area of your life, we have a tendency of taking it on as a problem of ourselves, meaning, I'm not good enough for this, or I guess that's not meant for me, right? We allow it to mean something about us and our innate self-worth and our innate being. And the work that I do, I think, is so important because that is not true. Just because we are stuck in one area of our life or we keep doing some negative pattern or bad behavior, like a bad habit or something, and we're trying to overcome it and we haven't, that doesn't mean anything about us. And that's why I love the work that I do, because there is a bigger force at play. The subconscious mind operating 88% of your mind shows us that just because we haven't accomplished a goal or we're stuck in a bad habit doesn't mean that it's us. If we have learned a behavior, it can be unlearned. And so what that tells us is that our ways of being are learned, and that's not who we are innately. We weren't born with the inability to exercise or the inability to eat healthy. We learned those behaviors. And that is such a big part of my message, because we have so much shame in our society, in ourselves, in our personal lives. And that shame isn't always warranted because we take on meanings that aren't true. And so if I can help show people that what they're carrying isn't who they are, then that's all I want to do. And that's the deeper level of the work that I do, is showing people that, you know, they can be different and that their ways of being aren't true to who they are meant to be as a person. And so with that, if anyone wanted to try hypnosis or work together or get more information, I offer one-on-one sessions. My perfect ideal client, the person I love to work with, is the person who is struggling setting boundaries, the person who's feeling disconnected with their life, the person who is maybe building up resentment because they don't know how to voice their opinions and their needs and their concerns. Those are the types of people I love to work with, because I love to help them connect with their true essence, their true self-worth, and show them that there is a different way of being, that they can have and cultivate healthy relationships. They can have a fulfilling career. They can feel good enough to speak up. So you can find more information at my website at lovingmywild.com, or you can follow me on Instagram at lovingmywild. I offer a free intro call to give more information, kind of debunk all of the hypnosis myths and misconceptions, and give people a little bit of a taste of what their path forward could look like.
Right. So I will put in the show notes the links for anybody that is listening to Adriana and wants to even just as a chat and exploring so that you can do so. So thank you, Adriana, for being here, for taking the time to talk to us a little bit more about a topic that I know for some people can sound a little bit woo, but exploring, right, the subconscious mind, talking about the buzzword neural pathways and how we can actually form those. And the last thing that you said, which I also completely agree, is every human being has the capacity to change and evolve, whatever that looks. And for whatever reason that happens, whether we choose it or not, the reality is that we evolve. Physically, we evolve and we change. And therefore, we have the capacity to change and evolve in all of the other aspects of who we are as human beings. So, hypnosis gives you the opportunity and a way to be a little bit more in control of that evolution that is happening so that you can guide it. So, thank you for being here. I am so glad for the opportunity. And then to all the ladies, I will see you in the next one. Until then, bye.